Absolutely. So I always try to tell players I work with that my belief is that the best golfers aren't necessarily the ones who hit the best shots the best, because everybody can hit their best shots well, right? The best golfers are the ones who can do all the bad stuff well, right? Who can find a way to get the ball in the hole even though they have their B game or their C game. Right?
Hmm.
They can find a way to handle that adversity. And the way that, from my perspective, that they do that is they don't get caught up in what is the what is the significance or the consequence of what just happened in the context of this expected outcome, right? So this back to the
Mm-hmm.
expectations piece. They say this is the next opportunity to make a positive contribution
Yeah.
towards that future outcome, right? Because they
Hmm.
don't know yet what they're going to shoot. They haven't that story hasn't been written. And sometimes I use this analogy with people of when we have expectations, it's like the story has already been written, right?
Mm.
And that we're just kind of there living in it and it's already been written. I want you to be a writer, right? I want you to go out and
Yeah,
write
that's
the
good.
story. And if we think about that analogy, good stories, right? Great
Mm.
novel you've read has arcs, right? As peaks, as valleys, and as plot twists, right? Like that's what makes great stories great. So we don't know what's going to happen in this story, but you have opportunity to go write that next piece. So
That's
rather
good.
than standing in the trees and going, I can't believe I hit another one 30
Hmm.
yards to the right? The question can be like what can I do right now to create this great story, right? And maybe the thing we do is we punch out sideways, right? Like maybe that is part of that great story. So now we can
Hmm.
hit it tight and make the putt, right? Or maybe this is the great moment where the right play is to thread the needle and hit a great punch shot, right? Like
Yeah.
there's different parts of the story that are great is different in a different way. But if you become an active participant in writing the story, right,
Yeah.
then it's not all about the end of the story, if that
I
makes
love
sense.
that. I love that analogy of a story because I think that brings a few things out in me is number one, like all the good stories have ups and downs, and be open to that being your story, whether it's your golf round, whether it's a tournament. It's
Mhm.
like that's part of what makes this game wonderful is the actual chaos that ensues in every single round of golf, whether it's something small or
Yep.
like catastrophically big. The chaos is
Yep.
why we love the game. So being open to the story not going the way you think. So that kind of brings me like zooming out back to our
Hmm.
grid. Back to our grid,
Hmm.
and expectation appears to live above that horizon line. It's all future based in some level. Is that
Hmm.
true? What do you think? I mean, like
So
in
it's all expectations all to the
to the right.
right?
Yeah,
But it's
sorry,
not
future. Yep.
necessarily above, right? Because sometimes we go out and we're like, yeah, just not been hitting it well, right? Like I
Yeah.
expect this to be a disaster, right? I
Mm,
expect this not to go well, right? Like we don't like to talk about those expectations as much, right? We talk a lot about people having lofty expectations,
yeah.
right? But um, there have been a few coaches I can think of who I've worked with who've looked at their teams and warm up and turned to me and gone, "We're going to lose by 100," right? And it's like in a sport where like you don't even win or lose by 100, right? But it's like we're going to lose by 100 today, right?
Yeah.
Because they see something and suddenly that's the expectation, and then everything becomes about like how do we not lose by 100, right? And it like creates
Yeah.
its own kind of tension. So sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative, but to your point, it's always
Yeah.
expectations are always about the future, sometimes a reflection of the past, but they're always about the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I guess if we're gonna use the model as kind of the the map for this, what are some of the
Hmm.
ways that when we identify and we're aware of our expectations that they might not be serving us in that moment?
Yep.
How, what are the tools that we use to get back to the middle, to that performance zone?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we'll probably talk about this a lot over these videos, but my big thing with that model is to think about anchor.